This is the miter saw. The miter saw is for cross cutting, but can also make angled cuts. This miter saw can cut material that's about 2.5 inches thick, but it does need to be relatively narrow. The widest board that you could cut on here is about 6 to 7 inches wide. If you need to adjust your angle, we can do that here. Its default is on 0, but you can change the angle all the way up to 50 degrees in either direction. What we've got here is a miter saw on a mobile base. So if this needs to be moved around the shop, that's fine. But as you're moving it around the shop, just make sure to move it by the handle over here and not our extendable arms. We have some extending arms that can come out. So if you have an extra long board, and you can either get the help of a friend or a neighbor to hold it, or you can use these extending arms for that as well. We have a locking mechanism back here. So if we bring the blade down, we can lock that in place so that it safely keeps that blade down. So if you ever come up to the machine and it's like this, then just loosen that mechanism and allow it to come back up. The other thing we have is our trigger to run the machine. And on this saw, it also has a little safety lever that needs to be pushed to the side to allow you to start the machine. Okay, as far as safety goes on the miter saw, we want to make sure to observe our margin of safety, meaning that we have our hands and fingers always 2 to 4 inches away from any blade. This doesn't have a hold down clamp, so you can either set up some type of clamp, or it can just be held by hand, but it needs to be held flat against the saw and up against the back fence here. You need to measure and mark a line. So far on this example piece, I have it marked at 25 inches. So this is the piece that I want to keep, and this is my waste block. So I want to make sure as I bring this saw down, I'm not going to turn it on yet. I'm just going to bring it down and watch where that blade's going to cut. I'm going to line it up with my pencil mark so that I cut to the line, but not through the line onto my measured material over here. Once I've got it in place, I'm about ready to make my cut. But one thing to keep in mind is if I'm operating the saw with my right hand, then my left hand should be to the left of the blade. If I'm operating the saw with my left hand, then my right hand should be to the right of the blade. You just want to make sure never to crisscross your arms. Otherwise, you may end up cutting your hand or arm. Once you feel like you have the blade in the right spot, bring it back up. You'll go ahead and turn the saw on, carefully make your cut. And for cleaner cuts, go ahead and let the saw spin down at the bottom before bringing it back up. So here's an example. So I've made an accurate cut on my line, and now I've got my off cut that I can throw away. I'll also show an example of an angled cut. If I needed to cut at an angle of 45 degrees, I could set that over there, measure and mark my line. Now, be careful because it's at a different angle, but the operating is exactly the same. So I'm going to carefully bring this down. And the neat thing about that is that now if I were making something like a picture frame, then I can get that miter cut here on this machine. Just remember to put it back to its normal operating position, which would be 0 degrees. So that's the miter saw. Please just keep in mind all the safety guidelines as you're using this machine and be safe.